The airport terminal buzzed with holiday energy, kids tugging on parents' jackets, business travelers packing with Bluetooth headsets, and elderly couples clutching boarding passes with nervous smiles. It was a Thursday afternoon in Denver, the kind of day when winter sunlight bounced off windows like glitter, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon pretzels from the food court. Flight 218 to Seattle was already boarding, the gate agent calling out groups with rehearsed cheerfulness. In the crowd, Emily Carter, tiny for her 11 years, stood silently beside her mother, fingers orbiting the edges of a worn blue notebook. Its pages bulged from endless drawings, flight controls, runway diagrams, cockpit checklists, each one penciled with a precision far beyond her age. Her mother, Laura, squeezed her shoulder. "You okay, Em?" she asked gently. Emily nodded but didn't speak. She just swallowed a breath that stuck like a stone in her throat. The trip was supposed to be a fresh start, her mother said. New school, new home, new everything. Yet all Emily could think about was what they were leaving behind, or rather, who. Her father would have known how to make this easier. He always knew. He had been a pilot, confident, fearless, alive in the sky. He used to bring Emily into the cockpit simulator and laugh when her tiny hands reached for the yoke. "One day," he'd say, "you'll be up there for real." But that day came and went too soon. A freak incident during a routine test flight stole him away, no warning, no goodbye. Now the sky wasn't a dream anymore. It was a reminder. "Welcome aboard," a smiling flight attendant said as Emily and her mother stepped into the narrow aisle of the Airbus A320. The cabin lights glowed a soft amber, warm and comforting. The overhead vents hissed with cool air. People were settling in, buckling seat belts, adjusting bags, showing each other phone photos. Emily slid into seat 12A, right beside the window. Her mother took the seat next to her. The airplane felt impossibly huge, rows stretching far ahead and behind, engines humming with promise. She pulled her notebook from her lap and opened to her favorite page, a perfectly sketched cockpit front panel, labeled meticulously. Dad's handwriting dotted the margins, gentle reminders, little jokes, memories inked into paper. A friendly voice crackled through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Cascade Airlines Flight 218. We're expecting a smooth ride up to Seattle today, flight time just under 2 hours. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." The last of the passengers filled in. Somewhere a baby giggled. A businessman tapped away at his laptop. A couple exchanged a quick kiss as the safety demonstration began. Emily glanced out the window as they pushed back, the airport slowly sliding away. Her breath fogged the glass for a moment before fading like her father's memory, there 1 second, gone the next. She clutched the notebook closer. If he were here, she thought, he would tell me to look, to really look, because flying is the closest humans ever come to magic. The plane taxied onto the runway, engines revving louder until they roared. Then lift. Emily's stomach fluttered as the wheels left the ground. Snow-dusted mountains shrank beneath them, roads twisting like threads through evergreen forests. Clouds welcomed them into their soft gray kingdom. For a while, everything felt peaceful. The seatbelt sign turned off with a soft ding. Passengers began moving, stretching legs, asking for water, flipping magazine pages. A flight attendant wheeled a beverage cart down the aisle, bumping occasionally as the plane hit light turbulence. Emily scribbled in her notebook, glancing forward occasionally, imagining the pilots, confident men or women, focused on their instruments, checking weather patterns, adjusting course. She admired them, envied them. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain spoke again, voice smooth and calm, "we're reaching cruising altitude now. Conditions look excellent." Bang! A violent jolt. The plane jerked left so hard Emily's shoulder slammed the window. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Cups toppled. The beverage cart rolled backward until a flight attendant caught it, eyes wide. The lights flickered. Then another thud. A deep, terrifying groan shuddered through the aircraft's aluminum frame, as though something massive had struck them from outside. Emily's heart crashed against her ribs. She clung to her armrest, notebook sliding to the floor, skidding forward until it vanished under someone's shoe. Oxygen masks dropped with a chilling hiss. Yellow snakes dangling, sudden, lifeless, demanding attention. Screams erupted. Someone shouted, "Oh my God!" A child began wailing behind her. Seat belts clicked frantically. The overhead bins rattled. The plane was falling. The engines didn't sound right. Their steady roar had become a sputtering, gasping wheeze, like they were choking on gravity itself. Emily's breath hitched, but she didn't pull down the oxygen mask. She stared forward with wide, unblinking eyes. The intercom clicked again, but this time the captain's voice trembled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have lost both engines." Those words, "both engines," didn't feel real. They sank like lead into every mind on the plane before bursting into raw panic. Emily's mother yanked the oxygen mask toward her daughter's face. "Emily, mask now." Emily obeyed, slipping it on with shaking hands, breathing shallow and uneven. But she barely felt the tube or the rubber edges. She felt something else. Something old, familiar. Her father's voice. "When everything goes wrong, pilots don't panic. They think." Emily forced her gaze forward again. The plane nosed downward, altitude dropping rapidly. The overhead lights flashed erratically. The aisle lights glowed like emergency beacons guiding them into darkness. A flight attendant made her way toward the cockpit, gripping seat edges for balance, but the plane lurched again, sending her crashing into a row. A man helped her up. People were crying prayers into their palms. Emily's notebook, her lifeline to her father, was gone somewhere beneath panicked feet, but the lessons were still in her head. Every switch, every warning, every second mattered. Her throat tightened, but she unbuckled her seat belt anyway. Her mother grabbed her arm. "Emily, no, stay here." I need to check the pilots," Emily choked out. "Absolutely not." "But what if they need help? Mom, please." Laura's grip faltered as another violent tremor rattled the plane. People around them were begging, to God, to fate, to anyone listening, but Emily wasn't begging. She was thinking. Her father taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing what must be done despite the fear. Before her mother could grab her again, Emily bolted into the aisle. The world around her spiraled, passengers screaming, lights strobing, the air thick with terror. She stumbled forward, gripping seat backs, heart pounding like a frantic drum. The cockpit door hung ajar. That wasn't supposed to happen, ever. Her pulse surged. She pushed the door open and froze. Inside, the cockpit's panels flashed frantic red. Alarm sirens screeched. The windshield showed nothing but a spinning blur of clouds. And both pilots were slumped unconscious in their seats, bodies motionless. Emily's breath caught high in her chest. No pilots. No engines. A falling aircraft. Her voice cracked into a whisper. "Oh God." She wasn't supposed to be here. She was just a kid. But she was also the only person on that plane who knew the difference between hope and certain death. The plane tilted again, and Emily fell forward into the captain's chair. Her small hand landed on the flight controls. For a moment, one impossible suspended moment, the world held its breath with her. Then the altimeter kept dropping. And the sky kept falling. Emily's small fingers trembled as they hovered over the yoke, her eyes scanning the dizzying array of switches, dials, and flashing lights in front of her. The cockpit smelled of burning electronics and fear, a metallic tang that filled her nose and stung her throat. Her heart pounded like a bass drum in a concert hall, every beat echoing the words she dared not speak. Impossible. She glanced at the pilots. Both faces were pale, unmoving, eyes closed as if the world outside the cockpit had vanished. The thought struck her like lightning. They're not waking up. I'm the only one who can, she swallowed hard, trying to breathe through the panic tightening around her chest. From somewhere behind her, the cabin erupted. A mother's wails pierced the alarm bells. A man shouted into his phone, likely telling a loved one goodbye. Oxygen masks hung like ghostly reminders that survival had become a fragile, fleeting commodity. Emily had to focus. Panic would get her nowhere. Her father's voice returned in memory, calm and precise. When everyone panics, pilots think. Focus on what you can control. Emily's gaze snapped back to the panel. She remembered the emergency drills her father had taught her. If engines fail, stabilize altitude, find glide path, communicate, assess landing options. She nodded to herself. The words sounded strange coming from a child, but they were the only lifeline she had. She leaned forward, her small hands brushing the yoke. A crackling voice filled the cockpit intercom. It was weak, distant, yet unmistakably authoritative. Flight 218, Flight 218, respond. Do you read me? Emily swallowed. Her lips trembled. She pressed the mic. Hello, I'm not a pilot, she stammered, voice cracking. The pilots, they're unconscious. I think I have to, I can try. Her words faltered as the plane jolted violently to the left, throwing her partially across the chair. She caught herself, clutching the yoke with every ounce of strength she had. A pause on the line. Then a voice, calm but edged with disbelief, returned. Who is this? Repeat, identify yourself. I'm 11, Emily whispered almost apologetically, cheeks wet with tears. But I know a little about flying. My dad taught me. The silence that followed was endless. Then, 11, you are serious. We have 2 unconscious pilots. Are you saying you want to fly the aircraft? Emily nodded, though the controller couldn't see her. Yes, please, tell me what to do. A long, stunned pause, then urgency broke through. Okay, stay calm. Don't touch anything unless I tell you. We'll guide you. First, stabilize the plane. Hold the yoke steady. Emily's hands tightened. The yoke felt impossibly large, her fingers struggling to wrap around it. She obeyed, moving the stick forward slightly, then back, testing, trembling, praying that she remembered correctly. The plane's nose leveled. For a heartbeat, it held a fragile suspension of terror. Then came the shriek of warning alarms, more insistent than ever. The red lights on the panel danced wildly. Emily, altitude dropping. You're losing too much height too fast. Can you see outside? Emily glanced through the cockpit windshield. Below, clouds swirled like a gray storm ocean. Flashes of sunlight illuminated jagged mountain peaks, snow-capped, unyielding, and far too close. She swallowed her fear. Yes, she said, voice firmer than she felt. I can see, I think I can hold it. Good, you need to keep the nose up slightly, maintain lift, trust the plane. And Emily, the controller's voice cracked with tension. There's only one runway we can attempt to reach. Only one. If this attempt fails, there's no second chance. Emily's stomach dropped like a stone. Only one attempt. The weight of that responsibility pressed on her chest, making each breath a struggle. She felt sweat slide down her temples. She tried not to look at the pilots again. Their still, unconscious bodies were a constant reminder of what was at stake. Okay, she whispered, gripping the yoke tighter. I understand. One chance. She exhaled slowly and remembered the first thing her father had taught her about flying. Flying isn't about force. It's about finesse. The plane wants to fly, help it. She adjusted the yoke gently, watching as the plane responded, a slight rise in altitude. Sparks flew from some indicator on the panel and smoke curled from a small vent near the throttle. Her heart skipped. Fire. Something was on fire, but she had no time to think. She had to focus. Behind her, passengers screamed, prayed, and clutched loved ones. A flight attendant stumbled down the aisle, shouting instructions and begging people to stay calm. Emily caught sight of her mother in the crowd, face pale, eyes wide, lips moving in silent prayer. Emily swallowed her fear and nodded to herself. She could do this. She had to do this. The plane tilted slightly, the left wing dipping. Emily fought instinctively, pushing the yoke in the opposite direction, trying to compensate. Another alarm screamed. Sparks from a panel hit the console like tiny fireworks. "Emily, focus," the controller's voice urged. "We need to calculate glide path. Can you keep her level?" "Yes," Emily said, voice steadier. I think so, I'm holding." The world outside the cockpit shifted. Clouds whipped past, mountains appeared and disappeared in fog. The runway lights in the distance blinked like tiny specks of salvation. Emily's heart leapt and sank in the same heartbeat. She had to reach them. She had to survive. Then a new horror. The landing gear indicators flashed red. The wheels weren't deploying. She gasped, panic rising like a tidal wave. "Emily, the landing gear is failing. You'll have to land without it. One attempt only." Her knees buckled beneath her. A plane, no engines, no pilots, no landing gear. She swallowed hard, then remembered her father's words. "Fear is a teacher. Listen carefully. The plane won't let you die if you respect it." Emily took a deep, shuddering breath. She scanned the instruments, trying to memorize every dial, every warning, every line of code on the panels that blinked like stars in a sky of chaos. She pressed her hand to the throttle, adjusting slowly. She felt a strange rhythm, a pulse, as if the plane itself was alive beneath her fingers. And for a fleeting second, terror became something else: focus, precision, survival. The plane lurched again, violently, throwing the windshield into a blur of clouds and snow-capped peaks. Emily clutched the yoke as tears streamed down her face. The controller's voice broke through the chaos again. "Emily, you're doing incredibly well. Keep her steady. You're almost there, but there's fire on the left wing." Emily froze. Fire on the wing. Sparks danced like tiny demons in her peripheral vision. The left engine casing was compromised. Flames licked the edges of metal panels. Another jolt shook the aircraft. Her mind screamed, "I'm too small. I can't." Then she remembered her notebook, tucked away in the corner of the cockpit floor. Her father's sketches, his instructions, his faith in her. She wasn't alone. She never had been. Emily gritted her teeth. She would try, she would survive. Because if she didn't, no one would. The cockpit fell silent for a moment, not the absence of sound, but a suspended electric tension. Outside, the clouds spun. The engines whimpered. Flames glinted. Below, mountains loomed. And above all, one 11-year-old girl sat in the captain's chair, trembling but determined, about to make the impossible attempt. She had to land the plane, or die trying. Emily's hands shook violently as they hovered over the controls. Every red light, every blinking warning, every whirring dial felt like a countdown clock ticking toward doom. The plane groaned and shivered under her fingers as if it could sense the weight of the responsibility she carried. 11 years old, no pilots, engines dead, one runway, one chance. The math of survival was brutal yet clear. Her throat dry, she pressed the microphone again, voice trembling. "Hello, this is Emily, Flight 218. I'm the only one awake in the cockpit. The pilots, they're unconscious. I need guidance." A pause long enough to make her stomach knot. Then a crackling voice. "Flight 218, is this real? You are 11. "Yes," Emily said, almost whispering. I know a little about flying." Her small hands clenched the yoke, knuckles white. Sparks danced on the overhead panel and smoke began curling from a vent near the throttle. "Do not touch anything unless I tell you," the voice said, suddenly sharp with urgency. "I'm air traffic control in Seattle. We are going to guide you down. You can do this. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, though the controller couldn't see her. "Yes, I'll do it." The plane tilted again. The left wing dipped dangerously. Emily's stomach lurched. Her instincts screamed. She forced herself to remember her father's words. The plane wants to live, help it. She pushed gently on the yoke, coaxing the wing level. Sparks from the panel flared and an alarm shrieked like a banshee. She pressed a switch she didn't fully understand, just remembering what her father had taught. If the engines fail, keep her steady. Adjust flaps slowly. Don't fight, guide. The controller's voice was urgent now. Emily, altitude dropping, you need to stabilize. Listen carefully, I'll walk you through. Don't panic. Pull back on the yoke gently. Yes, gently hold. The plane obeyed, climbing just slightly. Outside, the world blurred into a spinning landscape of white clouds and gray peaks. She could see the faint glint of the Pacific Northwest coastline through a break in the clouds, a fragile line of light, a promise of solid ground. But that promise was terrifyingly far. Emily, the controller said, voice softer now. There's only one runway, only one, and the landing gear isn't deploying. Her heart stopped. What? You'll have to land without wheels. One attempt. If you fail, he didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need him to. She swallowed hard, hands gripping the yoke until her knuckles ached. Okay, she whispered. I understand. One attempt. Smoke began to curl thicker from the vent. A red glow reflected in the cockpit window. Fire on the left engine. Emily's chest tightened. Her breaths came in short bursts, panic rising like an unstoppable tide. She forced herself to calm down. Remember what Dad said. She pressed a few buttons, guided by memory, instinct, and sheer willpower. The fire monitor flickered. It wasn't enough to stop the flames entirely, but the plane's shuddering eased slightly. She exhaled, though it was shallow, trembling. The controller's voice returned. Emily, focus. We're bringing you toward the glide path. I need you to keep the nose slightly up. Don't let her dive. Trust the plane. She did. She trusted the plane. She trusted herself. She didn't have a choice. The cabin behind her erupted again, screams, prayers, sobs. Emily could hear the faint sound of someone praying aloud. Please, God, let us live. The sound grounded her. If the adults were panicking, she had to be calm. Calm could save lives. Emily reached out and adjusted the throttle slightly. She felt the aircraft respond like a living thing beneath her fingers, a giant creature she could guide but not control completely. The yoke shook. Sparks flew from the panels. She pressed the flaps gently. The plane leveled slightly. Good, the controller said. You're doing fine, keep her steady. You're almost on glide path. Emily blinked against the sweat dripping into her eyes. Her fingers ached. Her entire body shook. But she didn't let go. She could see it now, faint runway lights flickering through the clouds like tiny beacons of hope. Then a new alarm screamed, louder, sharper. Fire on the left wing. Fuel leak detected. Emily's stomach dropped. The plane could explode at any second. The flames licked closer to the fuselage. Her mind raced. Options. None. Hesitation. Dangerous. She remembered a lesson her father had drilled into her head. When fear freezes you, act with what you know, not what you wish you knew. Emily took a deep, shuddering breath. She adjusted the yoke, flaps, and throttle in one fluid movement, a combination of instinct, memory, and sheer luck. The plane stabilized again. She glanced down at the pilots. Both were still unconscious, oblivious to the chaos. Emily's throat tightened. She couldn't think about their fate, only about what she had to do now. Emily, listen carefully, the controller said, his voice low but urgent. The glide path is tricky. You're approaching mountains on your left. Slight correction, yes, hold her steady. Don't panic. Emily's hands were shaking uncontrollably now, sweat running down her face, mixing with tears, but she did it. She adjusted the plane, nudging it slowly left, then right, following instructions. She was flying. Somehow, against every rational expectation, she was flying. The world outside became a blur, clouds whipping past, the faint outline of mountains and forests spinning below. The runway lights were brighter now, closer. Salvation, but still so far. Then another jolt, the plane dipped sharply. Sparks exploded from the left panel. Smoke thickened. Flames flickered closer. Emily's heart leapt into her throat. "Emily, you need to correct," the controller yelled. She twisted the yoke, pulled gently, nudged the throttle. The plane shuddered. The wings leveled. The runway loomed ahead, shimmering through smoke and cloud like a promise and a threat at the same time. Her fingers were raw from the controls, her arms trembling violently. Sweat ran down her back. The cabin behind her was full of screams and prayers, each one punctuating the terrible, fragile dance of survival she now led. And yet she refused to look back. Not now, not ever. She could do this. She had to. The controller's voice softened. "You're doing amazing. Just a little further, keep her steady. You're almost there." Emily's mind raced. One attempt. No pilots, no engines, a burning wing. She swallowed fear. She remembered the final lesson her father had given her before his death. Courage isn't not being scared. It's moving forward when everything tells you to run. Emily squared her shoulders, gritted her teeth, and whispered to herself, "I'm not running, I'm landing." The plane surged forward, wings trembling, alarms screaming. The runway grew larger in her view. Salvation was close, yet peril lurked in every flickering warning light. Every decision was life or death. She pressed forward, and the cockpit seemed to hold its breath with her. Outside, the world waited, chaotic and indifferent, for the courage of a single 11-year-old girl to bend fate itself. She was in control now. And there was no turning back. The cockpit smelled of smoke and burned circuitry. Every gauge blinked red. The plane groaned like a wounded animal shivering under Emily's small hands. Her knuckles ached from gripping the yoke, but she didn't let go. One glance out the windshield showed a world spinning fast and indifferent. The mountains were closing in. The runway, her only chance, was still miles away. "Emily, listen to me," the controller said, voice taut but calm. "You need to maintain your glide path. Nose slightly up, hold steady." Emily nodded even though he couldn't see her. Her heart raced like a jackhammer in her chest. Nose up, steady, glide, repeat. Over and over like a mantra. She had to memorize the rhythm of survival. Every flicker of the instruments, every tremor of the fuselage, every alarm was now a lifeline. "Check flaps, adjust carefully," the controller instructed. Emily's small hands worked quickly, moving the levers she had practiced on in memory. The plane stabilized just enough for her to breathe. But that was fleeting. A sudden jolt threw her forward, sending her forehead smashing against the console. Stars danced across her vision. Through the haze, she glimpsed the left engine. Flames licked the metal casing, bright and hungry. Sparks rained from the instrument panels. She swallowed bile. One misstep, 1 second of hesitation, and the plane could explode midair. "Emily," the controller's voice broke the haze. "Altitude dropping too fast. You need to gain some lift." She pressed back on the yoke with all the strength in her arms, lifting the nose slightly. The plane groaned but obeyed. It was a living thing now, coiled and trembling, responding to her hands with reluctant trust. Below, the ground rushed closer. Snow-dusted forests flashed like white and green streaks, rivers twisting like silver ribbons. Every second brought her closer to either salvation or death. "Emily, we have a problem," the controller said. "Landing gear isn't deploying. You're going to have to belly land. 1 attempt only. Do you understand?" Emily's stomach sank. She swallowed hard, nodding even though she knew the controller couldn't see her. Belly landing. It meant scraping across concrete with sparks flying, metal screaming, 1,000 potential ways to die. "Yes, I understand," she whispered. I'll do it." "Good, keep her steady," the controller urged. "There's fire on the left wing. Watch the instruments. You need to focus." Emily focused. She blocked out the screams from behind her, the cries of frightened children, the sobs of mothers. She concentrated on the plane, on the yoke, on the rhythm of survival. Sparks continued to fly, smoke thickened, and the red lights blinked incessantly. But she worked. Nudge by nudge, lever by lever, she coaxed the plane forward. Then the plane jolted violently. Emily gasped. The left wing dipped dangerously. Her hands flew to the yoke, pulling back with all her strength. The metal groaned. Sparks flew across panels. She felt as though she were fighting a living beast, trying to convince it to survive just one more second. "Emily, you need more lift," the controller shouted. She adjusted the throttle, watching the altimeter. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the plane leveled. Smoke swirled thick around the panels, the acrid smell stinging her nose. But for a moment, the plane held steady. Below, the runway lights flickered like distant stars. Salvation and terror intertwined. Emily knew she had to guide the plane precisely or risk losing everything. "Emily, almost there," the controller said. "Maintain glide, adjust flaps gently. One chance, you can do this." Emily's eyes scanned the runway through the smoky cockpit window. It seemed impossibly far. Her mind screamed with doubt. "I can't. I'm too small. I'm just a kid." But then she remembered her father's words. "Courage isn't not being scared. It's moving forward when everything tells you to run." She squared her shoulders, her fingers white on the yoke. "I'm moving forward," she whispered. The plane dipped again, dangerously low. Sparks flew from the panels. Flames licked the left wing. She pushed back on the yoke, then nudged the throttle forward. The aircraft obeyed with a reluctant shudder. In the cabin, panic rose like a tidal wave. A mother shielded her baby, praying. Children screamed. Passengers clung to armrests as if sheer desperation could hold them to life. But Emily blocked it out. She had one focus: the plane. The controller's voice grew urgent. "Emily, runway lights are in sight. Adjust the flaps fully. Nose slightly up. Prepare for landing. You have one chance. One attempt. Can you do this?" Emily nodded, even though her mother and the entire plane were counting on her. "Yes," she whispered. "I can." The plane shuddered violently as they descended further. Smoke thickened, alarms screamed. The left wing fire grew, dancing like a creature ready to rip the aircraft apart. But Emily pushed forward, guided by memory, instinct, and sheer willpower. The runway grew larger, more distinct, a fragile thread of salvation in a sky of chaos. "Emily, you're almost there," the controller said. "Hold her steady. You're doing amazing." Emily's throat burned. Sweat streamed down her face. Her fingers ached. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. But she refused to let go. The runway was close. She could see emergency vehicles lined up, flashing lights in anticipation of disaster. Then a sudden, violent jolt. The plane dipped toward the right. Sparks exploded across the cockpit. Smoke thickened further. The fire on the left wing threatened to consume the fuselage. Emily's mind screamed, "I can't fail, I can't fail, I can't fail." Her fingers flew across the controls, adjusting flaps, nudging throttle, coaxing the plane into a glide path. Slowly, impossibly, the aircraft responded. The runway grew ever closer, a concrete ribbon in a sea of chaos. One attempt, one chance. Emily's chest heaved. She forced herself to focus, to breathe, to guide the plane with all her strength. This was the moment her father had prepared her for, the moment that demanded everything she had. The plane leveled just enough to approach the runway. Sparks still flew. Smoke still choked the cockpit. Flames still licked the left wing. But she was alive, and she was in control. The moment of truth was seconds away. And the world held its breath with her. The plane shuddered violently, the left wing trembling with fire licking its edges. Sparks danced across the control panels. Alarms screeched in relentless staccato, and smoke curled thickly into Emily's eyes. Her knuckles were raw, her arms trembling, yet she held the yoke as though her life itself depended on it, because it did. And not just hers. Every soul aboard Flight 218 was tethered to her courage, to her ability to think when panic demanded she scream. Her breath came in short, uneven gasps. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat and let the memory of her father flood her mind. She could hear his voice, steady, unwavering, full of calm authority even in the worst of storms. Flying isn't about the machines, Emily. It's about trust. The plane wants to live, let it. Don't force it, guide it. Emily opened her eyes, wiping the sweat and tears from her brow. She could do this. She had to. Emily, runway lights are straight ahead. The controller's voice crackled urgently. Adjust your approach, you're almost there. She nodded, swallowing the panic threatening to choke her. She scanned the instrument panels, recognizing patterns she had memorized from endless hours in the simulator with her dad. Altimeter steady, airspeed slowing slightly, flaps adjusted, yes. Rudder yaw, okay. She pressed the throttle forward, coaxing the plane into stability, though the engines offered nothing but silent resistance. Smoke thickened. Sparks flew with every tremor of the fuselage. The left wing burned hotter. Emily could hear passengers screaming, praying, sobbing behind her. She blocked it out. She had one focus, the plane. Her father's lessons guided her hands almost automatically. If the engines fail, glide. If the gear won't deploy, prepare for a belly landing. Adjust flaps gently. Watch your approach. One mistake could cost everyone. Emily took a deep, shuddering breath. One mistake, I can't make any. The runway stretched ahead, a ribbon of hope amidst clouds and smoke. Emily's tiny fingers moved over the controls, her movements deliberate, precise. The yoke trembled under her grip, but she remained calm. Her hands and the plane moved as one. The left wing fire flared suddenly, flames leaping toward the fuselage. Sparks rained across the cockpit, smoke stinging her eyes. Emily pressed forward on the throttle, nudged the yoke, adjusted the flaps. The plane groaned but obeyed. Emily, hold steady. You're almost on the glide path, the controller shouted. She focused, almost there. Her heart pounded as she guided the plane closer to the runway. She could see the tarmac now, emergency vehicles lined up like sentinels, their lights flashing in frantic rhythm. Fire trucks, ambulances, rescue personnel, all waiting, all hoping she would succeed. Then a violent dip. The left wing's fire intensified. Sparks erupted from the cockpit panel. The plane pitched dangerously to the right. Emily's stomach lurched. Do not panic, do not panic. Her hands flew over the controls, nudging, adjusting, coaxing the aircraft back into alignment. Sweat ran down her face and mixed with tears. The plane groaned, then steadied, though only barely. The cabin behind her was a storm of panic and prayer. She could hear passengers sobbing, some screaming, some whispering farewells. Mothers shielded children, hands clasped in desperate hope. Emily ignored it all. The plane was alive beneath her fingers, a giant creature she had to guide. Her father's voice rang in her memory again. Courage isn't not being scared. It's acting when everything tells you not to. Emily whispered, I'm acting. The plane leveled again, approaching the runway with terrifying precision. She adjusted the flaps fully, pushed the yoke forward slightly to maintain glide, and prepared for the belly landing. Sparks continued to erupt. Smoke thickened. The fire on the wing licked closer, but Emily's determination hardened. Almost there, almost there, almost there. The controller's voice was urgent, precise. Emily, runway in sight, glide path aligned. You can do this, trust the plane. Emily's small body shook violently with exertion. Every nerve screamed. She could feel the plane responding, every groan and vibration telling her to adjust, adjust, adjust. She pressed forward on the throttle, nudged the yoke, lifted the nose slightly. Then another violent jolt. The plane rocked dangerously. Sparks flew. Smoke filled the cockpit. Flames danced dangerously close to the fuselage. Emily's mind screamed with fear. No, I can't fail, I won't fail. Her father's words surged through her. Trust the plane, it wants to survive. You can do this. With all the courage she could muster, Emily adjusted the yoke, nudged the throttle, and coaxed the plane into alignment. The runway stretched beneath her, just within reach. One attempt, one chance. Emily, you're holding it, keep steady, the controller shouted. Emily nodded, though no one could see her. She adjusted flaps, nudged the yoke again, and prepared for impact. Sparks flew. Smoke thickened. The plane shuddered, but she remained calm, guiding it as her father had taught. The runway lights grew larger. Emergency vehicles swarmed at the edges, lights flashing. She could hear the passengers behind her, holding their breath, praying, screaming silently. Emily's chest heaved. Sweat streamed down her face. Every muscle in her body burned with exhaustion. Her hands were raw, her arms trembling, but she didn't let go. She had to hold on. The plane dipped dangerously. Flames licked the fuselage. Sparks erupted. Emily's teeth clenched. She nudged the yoke, pushed the throttle, adjusted the flaps. The plane groaned, shuddered, then held steady. The runway was moments away. Survival, hope, terror, all intertwined in one impossible thread. Emily focused. One attempt. One chance. She had to land. She had to save them all. And in that suspended, terrifying moment, she felt her father's presence with her, steadying her hands, guiding her through the storm. The world outside blurred, a spinning, chaotic storm of smoke, fire, and lights. But inside, Emily's focus was absolute. She was in control now. And the runway awaited. The acrid smell of smoke filled the cockpit, curling into Emily's nose and stinging her eyes. Sparks hissed from the console, bouncing across warning panels in chaotic bursts of red and orange. Her small hands gripped the yoke so tightly her knuckles turned white. Flames on the left wing licked closer to the fuselage with every shudder of the aircraft. Each breath Emily took felt heavy, like inhaling fire itself. Behind her, the cabin was a storm of terror. Mothers clutched children, their prayers sharp and urgent. Some passengers screamed. Others whispered desperate pleas into phones. The oxygen masks dangled overhead, half forgotten, as panic swept through the aisles like wildfire. Emily didn't hear any of it. She blocked it all out. She could only hear the pulse of the aircraft beneath her fingers, the crackle of the fire, the shriek of alarms, and the controller's urgent voice in her headset. "Emily, hold her steady. You're almost at the glide path," the controller shouted. Emily's teeth clenched. Her mind raced. Almost there, almost there, almost there. She nudged the yoke, adjusted the flaps, and coaxed the plane upward just enough to stabilize it. Sparks flew from panels across her vision, and the smoke thickened, but the aircraft obeyed. The left engine fire had grown into a blaze now, licking the wing and trailing flames across the fuselage. Emily's stomach dropped as she realized how close she was to disaster. One wrong movement, one slight miscalculation, and the plane could break apart midair. "Emily, altitude dropping. You're losing too much," the controller yelled. Emily pressed back on the yoke, lifting the nose slightly, and nudged the throttle. The plane shuddered violently, then leveled. She forced herself to breathe, her lungs burning, her arms trembling. Sweat ran down her face and neck. She wiped it away with the back of her hand, trying to keep her vision clear. Her father's words returned, steady and calm, a lifeline through the chaos. "Courage is acting when everything tells you to run. Trust the plane. Trust yourself." Emily swallowed hard. She had to act. She had to survive. She had to save everyone. "Emergency vehicles are on the runway. Prepare for landing," the controller said, his voice tense. "You're almost there, Emily. Keep her steady." She nodded, though he couldn't see her. The runway stretched ahead, a ribbon of salvation through the clouds and smoke, but it was still miles away. Flames danced along the left wing. Sparks continued to rain across the cockpit. The fuselage groaned with every adjustment. Emily's fingers ached, arms trembling, but she pressed forward. She adjusted flaps, nudged the yoke, pushed the throttle slightly. The plane leveled and she exhaled sharply. Just a little further, just a little further. Then a violent shudder. The plane rocked, pitching dangerously to the left. Flames flared, sparks shot across the panels. The left wing trembled. Emily felt her stomach rise into her throat. "Don't panic, don't panic, don't panic." She adjusted the yoke, nudged the throttle, and coaxed the plane back into alignment. Sweat dripped into her eyes. The smoke was thick now, curling like serpents across the instruments. Alarms screamed with relentless urgency. Behind her, the cabin erupted into chaos. A child screamed. A mother sobbed. A man whispered prayers into his phone. Emily blocked it all out. She had one focus, one task: survival. The runway lights grew larger, shimmering through the smoke like a fragile promise. She could see emergency vehicles lining the tarmac, lights flashing in frantic anticipation of disaster. Fire trucks, ambulances, rescue personnel, all waiting, all hoping she would succeed. The plane dipped again dangerously. Sparks exploded. Flames licked the fuselage. Emily's heart hammered. She adjusted flaps, nudged the yoke, coaxed the aircraft. The plane shuddered violently but held steady. "Emily, you're holding her, almost there," the controller shouted. She nodded, forcing herself to stay calm. She could see the runway clearly now, stretching beneath them like a slender lifeline. One attempt, one chance. She had to get it right. Then another violent jolt. The left wing dipped sharply. Flames surged closer. Sparks rained across the cockpit like deadly fireflies. Emily's stomach lurched. She pressed back on the yoke with every ounce of strength she had. The plane leveled. Smoke choked the cockpit. Sparks rained. Fire threatened to consume the fuselage. Emily's arms trembled. Her hands burned from gripping the yoke, but she didn't let go. She couldn't. The runway was so close now she could almost touch it with her eyes. Emergency personnel were ready. Lives depended on her. She forced herself to breathe, adjust, nudge, coax. Almost there, almost there, almost there. The plane groaned, shuddered, but obeyed. Emily pressed the throttle slightly. She adjusted the flaps fully. Nose up, steady glide. The runway stretched beneath them. The plane shuddered, sparks flew, flames licked the wing, smoke billowed, but Emily held steady. She was in control. And the world held its breath with her. The runway loomed beneath Flight 218 like a fragile thread of hope, streaking through smoke, clouds, and chaos. Emily's arms ached, her fingers raw from gripping the yoke, yet she refused to let go. Sparks rained across the cockpit. The acrid tang of smoke burned her nose and stung her eyes. Flames on the left wing licked hungrily toward the fuselage. Every second felt stretched to eternity, every heartbeat a drumbeat of terror and determination. Behind her, passengers screamed, prayed, and sobbed. Mothers shielded children. Fathers whispered frantic instructions. The cabin was chaos incarnate, yet Emily blocked it all out. Her focus was absolute. The plane, the runway, survival. "Emily, you're almost there. Keep her steady. Glide, glide, glide," the controller shouted, his voice cracking with urgency. She nodded even though he couldn't see her. The plane shuddered violently. Sparks exploded across the panels. Flames licked the fuselage, licking closer to the cockpit. Smoke curled in thick, choking waves. Emily forced herself to breathe. Almost there, almost there, almost there. The runway grew beneath her, stretching like a narrow ribbon of salvation. Emergency vehicles lined the tarmac, lights flashing, sirens blaring, ready for impact. Emily's stomach twisted. She had one chance, one attempt, one opportunity to save everyone. She adjusted flaps fully, nudged the yoke gently, and coaxed the aircraft into a glide path. Sparks continued to rain. Smoke swirled thickly. Flames on the left wing flared brighter, hotter. "Emily, belly landing. Nose slightly up, hold steady, brace," the controller shouted. Emily swallowed, grit her teeth, and pushed forward slightly, holding the nose just above the ground. The aircraft trembled. Sparks exploded from panels and smoke thickened. The left wing burned dangerously close to the fuselage. Her heart hammered, her mind raced, her arms screamed in exhaustion, but she didn't let go. She could do this. She had to. The runway lights blurred beneath them. She could see lines painted on the tarmac, flashing under the glow of emergency lights. She imagined her father beside her, calm, guiding her hands. "Trust the plane. It wants to survive. You can do this." Emily pressed the throttle gently, nudged the yoke, adjusted flaps, and held her breath. Sparks erupted across the cockpit. Flames surged along the fuselage. The plane shuddered violently as it made contact with the tarmac. The belly scraped the concrete. Sparks flew like deadly fireworks. Smoke billowed thickly into the cabin. Emily felt the plane resist, groaning, shuddering, yet holding together. Passengers screamed, some in terror, some in awe. Children clutched parents. Mothers prayed aloud. Fathers shouted encouragements, but Emily blocked it all out. Her world was the cockpit, the yoke, the plane. "Emily, keep her steady. Don't tilt, straight," the controller yelled. She did. She coaxed, nudged, adjusted. The plane skidded across the runway. Sparks and smoke danced around her. Flames flared from the left wing, but the aircraft held. The emergency crews flanked the runway, ready for impact. Water and foam sprayed in anticipation. The runway seemed endless, yet too short. Emily's heart pounded. Sweat and tears streamed down her face. She gritted her teeth and held the yoke tighter. Almost there, almost there. The plane shuddered violently again. Emily adjusted the nose slightly, nudged the throttle, coaxed it forward. Sparks flew across the panels. Smoke choked the cockpit. Flames flared dangerously close. She could see the end of the runway. The plane slowed, skidding across the tarmac with terrifying grace. Sparks sprayed, flames danced, but the aircraft held together. Emily whispered almost to herself, "We can do this. We will do this." The plane finally reached the end of the runway. With a final shudder, it ground to a stop. Smoke curled around the fuselage. Sparks hissed. Flames licked the left wing, but they did not consume the plane. The cabin erupted into cheers, sobs, and laughter. Passengers hugged, screamed, and collapsed onto the floor in relief. Mothers clutched children. Fathers cried openly. Emily's mother rushed into the cockpit, tears streaming, face pale but radiant. "You did it, you saved us all," she cried, embracing her daughter. Emily's body shook violently. Her fingers still gripped the yoke. Her arms burned. Her face streaked with sweat and tears. She nodded, unable to speak. She had done the impossible. Outside, emergency crews surrounded the plane. Fire trucks sprayed foam over the left wing, quenching the blaze. Rescue personnel rushed to check passengers. Helicopters hovered, sirens blaring. But inside the cockpit, time seemed suspended. Emily sat there, trembling, staring at the controls. She had survived. She had guided 174 lives through chaos, fire, and near-certain death. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, calm, proud. "I knew you could do it." Emily allowed herself a trembling smile. The plane had landed. But her story was only beginning. Emily's hands finally loosened their grip on the yoke. Her body shook violently from exhaustion, adrenaline, and disbelief. Around her, the cockpit smelled of smoke, scorched metal, and the faint tang of burned electronics. The plane, battered and wounded, had come to a complete stop. Outside, emergency crews swarmed, spraying foam, checking for fires, and tending to passengers. But for Emily, the world inside the cockpit was frozen, a heartbeat suspended between chaos and survival. The cabin erupted into emotion. Parents wept, clutching children. Strangers embraced, tears running down their cheeks. Phones were lifted in shaky hands, capturing a moment that would soon dominate news feeds across the globe. The passengers looked at Emily not as a child, but as a hero who had taken control of death itself and turned it into life. Her mother rushed into the cockpit, eyes wide with disbelief, voice breaking as she spoke. "Emily, you saved us all." She wrapped her daughter in an embrace that trembled with relief and pride. Emily, exhausted and trembling, could only nod, tears streaming down her face. She had done the impossible. She had landed a plane with 174 lives on board at 11 years old without a pilot and with a burning engine threatening to explode. Outside, the world had already begun to notice. News helicopters hovered overhead, capturing the emergency vehicles and the scorched fuselage. Reporters shouted into cameras, trying to capture a moment that felt unreal, A child had landed a commercial airliner. Social media exploded in seconds. Videos filmed by passengers flooded Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. The hashtag #GirlWhoFlew trended globally within minutes. Emergency responders helped passengers off the aircraft. Some needed medical attention, others were shaken but physically unharmed. Emily was gently led out of the cockpit by a firefighter, still trembling, still in shock. People whispered, pointed, and stared. Some cried, some laughed, some simply stared in awe. At the temporary triage area, passengers hugged her, clutched her hands, whispered thanks that would never leave their hearts. A flight attendant knelt beside Emily, eyes filled with tears. "You were amazing, incredible. You saved everyone. Do you understand? You saved them all." Emily, still trembling, tried to process it. She had trained for emergencies in simulators, learned about flying from her father, memorized emergency procedures. But nothing could prepare her for this. Real engines, real fire, real lives in her hands. The news cycle exploded. Interviews, photos, and footage of Emily in the cockpit flooded the world. Headlines screamed, "11-year-old girl lands plane after pilot's collapse. Flight 218's miracle. Child hero saves 174 lives. The girl who flew." Airlines, government officials, and even the president issued statements of awe and admiration. Aviation experts analyzed footage in disbelief, praising Emily's calm under pressure and instinctive mastery of the aircraft. Psychologists marveled at her ability to focus amid extreme fear. Social media campaigns launched to recognize her bravery. People around the world sent messages of hope, inspiration, and gratitude. But Emily barely noticed. Her mind was still processing the cockpit, the controls, the fire, the yoke, the faces of passengers, the screams, the prayers. She remembered every second, every jolt, every flicker of a warning light. She remembered her father's voice, calm and guiding. "Trust the plane, trust yourself." And she had. Days later, Emily and her family were invited to the airline's headquarters. The CEO, pale and awed, shook her tiny hands. "Emily, words cannot express how grateful we are. You saved 174 lives. You are our hero." She received a letter from the president praising her courage and quick thinking. The nation watched her on television, a young girl standing before reporters, her hair still tangled, her eyes wide, her voice shaking slightly as she recounted the events. I did what my dad taught me. I just tried to help." Everywhere she went, people recognized her. Strangers approached her in airports, in stores, on the street. Children wanted to know how she had done it. Adults wanted to shake her hand, cry with her, marvel at the impossible. Emily smiled shyly, overwhelmed by the attention but proud. Her father, watching her from memory in her heart, would have been proud. She had honored him, his lessons, and the courage he instilled in her. The fire, the smoke, the panic, the yoke, the runway, all of it had been a crucible, and she had emerged not just alive but victorious, carrying the lives of 174 souls on her small, determined shoulders. For weeks afterward, Emily was invited to speak at schools, aviation programs, and public events. She emphasized courage, calm, and trust in oneself, and in the knowledge one has prepared for. She became an icon of bravery, a symbol that age, size, or fear could never dictate the scope of one's heroism. Back at home, Emily's room remained the same. Her father's notebooks, his sketches, his manuals on flying. She would sit there sometimes, fingers tracing the pages, remembering how his lessons had saved lives. She knew that every spark, every jolt, every decision she had made in the cockpit had been guided by his memory. And though the world called her a miracle, a hero, an icon, Emily remained humble. She knew the truth. The plane had obeyed her, yes, but it had also trusted her. And she had trusted herself when everything screamed that she shouldn't. Flight 218 became legend. News networks replayed the landing again and again. Social media audiences marveled at the bravery of a child who had faced fire, smoke, and near-certain death, and emerged victorious. Aviation authorities held briefings, discussing safety procedures inspired by Emily's quick thinking. But for Emily, the story was simpler. She had saved 174 lives, just as her father had taught her to be brave, calm, and decisive. And in doing so, she had changed the world, or at least shown it that even a child with courage, knowledge, and determination could do the impossible. Years later, when Flight 218 passengers told the story, their eyes shone. She was just a kid, they said, but she saved us all. She flew the plane, she landed it. We owe her everything. Emily, now older, would always remember that day. The roar of the engines, the smell of smoke, the screams, the prayers, the runway stretching below her, and the life-altering moment when she became not just a girl, but a hero. The plane sat quiet now, but the legend of the girl who flew would never fade. And somewhere in the echo of her father's voice, Emily smiled, knowing she had lived up to the courage he had taught her. She had faced the impossible, and she had won.